we don't want to demonize alcohol per se. And I'm conscious that for some people, it's actually an incredibly important part of their life coping mechanism, as long as it's not taking over. But I also want to touch on the word alcoholic, which is something that I want to clarify from my perspective. I never use the term alcoholic. And the reason for that is because there is no diagnosis for an alcoholic. There is no line in the sand which tells you whether or not you are an alcoholic. It is not a recognized disease. So I think for everybody that's listening, and I say this to everybody, anybody that I work with, if you're drinking too much for you, that's the only question that needs to be answered. Am I drinking too much for me?
Illuminance specializes in developing sensory processing sensitivity, a natural high sensory intelligence present in 30% of the population, co-creating with the power of humanity to consciously evolve towards balance. This session features trained high sensory coaches, facilitators and consultants who coach other high sensory people and partner with organizations globally. To contact them directly or to find out about our programs, please see the details in the description.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Connolly, and I am an HSP coach that works with high functioning people who struggle with alcohol use disorder on some level. And I tonight am joined with my beautiful 3 co-hosts or co-participants in the group. And we are going to be talking about addiction, about substance use disorder, if we want to use the more politically correct term. And we're going to talk about it in the context of high sensory processing individuals, and how and if we are more susceptible to addictions, and then most importantly, what we can do to avoid falling into the trap of using substances to settle and calm our highly sensitive nervous systems. So before we get into the topic, I'm going to ask the team to introduce themselves. Who wants to jump in first?
I can start.
Thanks, Rikke.
I'm the farthest away from you, Sarah. So I'm in Denmark and I work globally. My name is Rikke Hartmann-Bossen. I'm an executive coach. I'm an HSP coach, and I work as a therapist as well. I specialize in narcissists and psychopaths, but I work with resourceful people who are curious to and dare to be the nature of who they are, to contribute more and better in the world and feel better. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Rikke.
I'll dive in. I'm Elisha May. I'm from the UK at the moment, and I'm a high sensory coach and creative empath, and I work with HSPs that are ready to just own who they are, embrace unconventional life, and have freedom of self.
Fabulous. Thanks, Elisha.
Well, hello, I'm Alexander. I'm from Germany. I'm also a coach working with all kinds of people, especially but not exclusively with high sensory and highly gifted people in German, French, and English. And I'm having a systemic approach, which whose purpose is mostly to bring in all the different parts of personality together so that life is more something of your own design than just the sum of the things happening to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm really excited about having this discussion because my journey with alcohol, and I think we'll focus on alcohol specifically for this conversation, was that I didn't know that I was high sensory until after I'd removed alcohol. And when I discovered the whole concept and the trait of being high sensory, all these kind of ducks fell into a row. I was like, wow, no wonder I've been using this substance as exuberantly as I was. But what had happened for me was I'd been using it for the reasons that anybody drinks, you know, for celebrations and for relaxing, etc. And then over time, it obviously builds up, and then a very traumatic 2 events happened, which kind of tipped me over the edge. But when I moved into coaching and working with people, I started to see this theme, these traits that everybody, not everybody, most people would talk about. Highly anxious, overwhelmed, trying to fit in, critical voice in the head, very deep thinkers, always worrying about what everyone else was doing or thinking. And so my question to you guys is, what is your experience, either personally or as a coach, in relation to HSPs and using substance such as alcohol to help them navigate through their lives?
I'm happy to dive in. So I'm gonna speak from a personal experience. And for me, it's funny, it's like I sort of loved what alcohol did because of being high sensation seeking. I used to love how that sort of that buzz, that lightheadedness, you know, would make you feel. But at the same time, the hangovers the next day, whether I drank a lot or not, I still felt so rubbish the next day. You know, really horrendous anxiety, paranoia, so incredibly emotional, like more than normal. And I was like, wow, I cannot do this to myself. So I was one of those odd ones that didn't go out every weekend drinking and stuff like that, but you know, I sort of dabbled in it. Then I had a really traumatic time when my brother died suddenly, and that was sort of for me a full-blown straight into an alcoholic problem, and it lasted all, you know, comfortably a year or so, and you know, in hindsight, was it good, wasn't it good? I don't know. At the time, it was helpful to a point, but I had no idea I was a HSP. Absolutely no clue. All I knew is I had these overwhelming, intense feelings and emotions. So not only was I grieving, I had the trauma that came with it because it was incredibly sudden. My mum was sick, so she couldn't be there for me emotionally. My dad was too busy grieving, as well as my mum. He was looking after my mum, so I'd lost my my rocks, my oxygen tanks, you know, as well as my brother. So I was dealing with all of it sort of kind of on my own, really, and just alcohol just seemed the most obvious choice. Looking back, I think it was potentially conditioning that had a sort of play in that, because it is this, oh my gosh, I can't cope, it's too much, what do people do? They drink. So in its easy access, you know, much more than sort of some substances. So I just went straight into alcohol, and my journey definitely for months was, you know, justifying, you know, if I'd worked the morning and it was sort of, I'd get back maybe early afternoon, I'm like, it's 12, it's not too early to drink, is it? You know, because it was just that coping mechanism that I'd be distracted at work, and that was great, even though it was pretty horrendous, but you're just too busy being distracted. Then you go home, and it just hits you like a brick wall. And it was just, right, you know, make sure I've got a bottle of something or bottle of this, you know. And it, yeah, I don't know if it helped or not, but I definitely got to a point where sort of just this knowing, this intuition just said to me, you can't keep doing this isn't the long game. You're gonna have to deal with this, so you know, you're gonna have to rip the band-aid. I actually went on antidepressants for a couple of years to sort of help with the transition. I had therapy and things like that, but it wasn't until I worked with high sensory people that's when it all just fell into place, and when I realized, actually, I'm going to experience life really intensely and really deeply, more than most people. And so now I'll still drink now, but there is always that slight temptation to drink more. So I don't drink alone. It's only when I'm socially with people, and I try and keep it to just one drink, and it is very sporadic, because there is always that temptation to just go a bit wild. And I love the physicalness of drinking, if that makes any sense. There's just something about holding a glass of wine or prosecco or whatever it is, G&T. You know, it's a sensory experience, I think, for HSPs, as well as the chemical experience that we want from it. So yeah, I could keep diving into that, but yeah, for me it was definitely, you know, it worked for a bit, but actually the issues were always there. You know, the trauma was always there, the grief. I had to just, you know, buckle up, as they say, and just ride it out and get sober and just make sure I just had the therapy and the support. But knowing I was HSP, that's where it really was a game changer for me.
Thank you for sharing that so openly. I really appreciate it. There's a couple of things that I wanted to quickly ask before I go to the other people. Was you said high sensation seeking. And another thing that often comes up with people that I work with is they say, I'm an all or nothing kind of person. Do you relate to that in terms of the high sensation seeking part of your experience?
Yes and no. I suppose when I think of what I've done in my past, I was often, you know, my dad would often describe me as, Elisha, you live on the edge a little bit too much. Can you just come back off the edge, please? But I realize now in hindsight, that was my high sensation seeking needs that needed to be satisfied. So I wasn't always doing it in a healthy way. But now I've learned that that's actually a need. I'm now doing it in a much more calm, grounded, yet exciting way. So it could be that, you know, I started kite surfing, so that's really exciting, it's healthy. I would go walking or wild camping, so I'm out in nature and getting the sort of the kick, so to speak, doing it through those ways, rather than creating drama and busying myself where it's crazy and things like that. But yeah, then it's the case of I need complete downtime, peace and quiet. Yeah, and I definitely I picked up another drinking problem when I was a couple of years on from that, when I was in the wrong relationship and basically living the wrong life. I was trying to run 2 businesses, working 6-7 days a week, you know, and again, I would walk in the door, you know, before I've even taken off my jacket and my handbag, I go straight to the fridge, pour myself a gin and tonic, straight away downed half of it. Then all of a sudden you know, it's an immediate effect with me, and it's just like, oh, okay, I feel slightly numb. Okay, now I'm good. Now I can enjoy my evening. And again, it was several months later that I realized, hang on a minute, we're back here again. We've got to start dealing with what's causing these symptoms and these stresses and this anxiety and this depression, which is what I did. So
wonderful, thank you. Well, I'm going to come back to the other point in a moment, but I'll pass on to the other 2 folk now for their input.
Yeah, I can go. I've never been an alcoholic myself, because I was my upbringing was with a stepfather who was alcoholic. So I did enjoy, and after a really bad breakup with a bipolar narcissist, I was a nerve wrack, and I can only take 1 or 2 glasses of alcohol, then I will get physically sick. But after this, I was such a nerve wrack. So I didn't know what to do, because I didn't want to go with medicine, but I knew I had to do something with my body, or to relax my body, because I had kids. I tried meditation. I tried, you know, everything you could do beyond something that you would get addicted to, because I believe medicine is something you get addicted to as well, and it's not healthy for your body. So I actually did the same as Elisha is saying. I said, well, a gin tonic might not be that bad. So I did that a couple of times, but I was just looking at myself, looking at this bottle, and said, you're not going to be any better than your stepfather. So I had to find other solutions, which in my my case is sugar. So I was so skinny at that time anyway, and sugar has always been my go-to. So that was just another unhealthy addiction that I couldn't control. So I had to control it by, I can only buy this many gram or whatever, or for this amount of money, or I really had to regulate it. But I would like to, because after that breakup, that was when I actually found out how my sensitivity was working. So it was also a wake-up call. But I like to share two client cases, which might be something people can relate to. I have one who is a VP. So he has a high performing job, a lot of responsibility globally. But he was into alcohol and pills. So it was really bad when I got to know him. And he was always feeling small, but didn't know why. So after therapy, we found out he was the youngest of a couple of siblings, and he was always held down. So when he understood his sensitivity and his kind of addiction to be the best, the fastest, the whatever, then he could, start getting off this alcohol, because he didn't need that rush or relaxation in the same way. But it was, I think it was after 3-4 sessions that he realized and understood his sensitivity. And then he could see, okay, if I need to work with myself, I need to feel what is me, because he never did. He just poured in more alcohol, and it, as you know, everybody needs more and more. And that's why pills came into the picture, because alcohol was too obvious now for the family. So pills were easier. So the combination of those. And I have another one. He's a high-level leader as well. It was the same story. He's been out of alcohol now for 2 years. Father was a psychopath, emotional neglect in the childhood, but he never saw himself as sensitive. He's a big guy, successful and everything. So what he couldn't do was not work. So work together with alcohol was his drug. So whenever he got, a day off, Saturday, Sunday, if he didn't work, he would go to the alcohol. He couldn't be with himself in the downtime, even though he has a beautiful family and all kind of stuff. So again, he had no clue he had the sensitivity. He had no clue about what brought him to this. So understanding, how did this sensitivity actually come into my life? And also about, he knew about the alcohol, but both of these are what we would in Denmark call, how can you say that? Luxury alcohol. So it's like whiskey, you drink expensive wine. So you're part of a wine club and nice dinners with customers. So it's kind of somehow legal. So it's not like sitting on a bench drinking beer in public. So they thought, oh, I'm one of the good guys drinking all the fine wine, and see, this is a 2,000 crown bottle, something, I can drink this as well. So they kind of, how do you say, make it legal.
100%. And it's a big part of, a lot of the people that I work with too, and most people I know, where there's an identity associated with the drinking, and there's a significance and there's a value that placed on it. And when you take that away, they're lost. They're like, I don't actually know how I can function, not just from a day-to-day soothe my anxiety or calm me down perspective, but from what will these people say? And I won't be the man anymore, and all these things. It's fascinating.
I can't go to parties. I can't go to receptions. I can't take a dinner with a customer, because who am I if I'm not drinking? How do I deal with other people if I'm not kind of drunk? So it's a huge thing. It's not just in this circumstance or relaxing myself. It's kind of everywhere I see, I need to be that personality. I have to step into that kind of alter ego where alcohol or other pills are kind of allowing me to be that me. So understanding that there's another me and what that actually is and how you can explore that. It's tough, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Thank you so much, Rikke. How about you, Alex? What's your experiences?
Well, I have a friend who is a medical general practitioner in France, and she once told me something that made me think quite a lot. She told me that in her experience over the decades, most, if not almost all of the people who came into her practice who had a drinking issue, whether acknowledged or not, were actually of strong sensitivity, whether acknowledged or not. So I think that we actually have two topics, which is alcohol on one side, addiction on the other side, with obvious bridges between the two. And that there's a specific topic of alcohol and HSP, because I know HSP who used to drink a lot or who drink a lot, but they're not alcoholics. And I think it has several functions, the obvious one being to numb down sensitivity because it's difficult to experience. But from my own experience, I also sense that, the first glass of wine, I'll rather have the impression of opening up a bit onto the inside and being more in contact, not after the second or the third one, but after the first one. And there's also this, perhaps, getting more contact to the inside. And I think there's obvious differences between men and women in a tendency, because women usually in many cultures are allowed, their sensitivity is rather accepted, and sensitivity is not culturally accepted in men. So they actually have to be in contact with themselves. They have to change something. Their normal modus operandi is not sensing, not being in contact with themselves. So I think alcohol can be an impoverishing gateway, but still a gateway into oneself in that sense.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think I would love to steer the conversation in a moment to, we don't want to demonize alcohol per se, and I'm conscious that for some people it's actually an incredibly important part of their life coping mechanism, as long as it's not taking over. But I also want to touch on the word alcoholic, which is something that I want to clarify from my perspective. I never use the term alcoholic. And the reason for that is because there is no diagnosis for an alcoholic. There is no line in the sand which tells you whether or not you are an alcoholic. It is not a recognized disease. So I think for everybody that's listening, and I say this to everybody, anybody that I work with, if you're drinking too much for you, that's the only question that needs to be answered. Am I drinking too much for me? Because the challenge that we have is that the stereotypical alcoholic is a benchmark which most people don't reach. Most people are not swigging vodka on a bench. What they are doing is drinking problematically, as in more than 7 glasses of wine a week, which is now proven to be creating problems, changes in the brain, problems with liver, increased levels of cancer. Now we're talking 7 150ml glasses of wine. Most people that are drinking would be drinking more than that, I would suggest, generally speaking. And so, but they're not an alcoholic. So we need to be really conscious of the language, I think, because if somebody's having problems in relation to their drinking is a problem. Whether they are sitting on a bus stop with a bottle of vodka or at home every night having 1 glass of wine. This is something I feel very strongly about, because it's something that stopped me from seeking help for a really long time. I wasn't an alcoholic. I was just somebody that was drinking too much for my unique physiology, biochemistry, psychology, etc. So I just want to point that out and get on my little soapbox about that word. But I do want to move on and talk about the use of alcohol by HSPs as a coping or calming tool. Do we feel that that is problematic specifically for HSPs, is the question.
I have like if you have ADHD or another kind of diagnosis, which I believe is high sensitivity as well, just maybe in one direction, so you can have that in any kind of direction. So I think that self-regulating is not healthy if it's something that you have to do. So if it's like you are nervous because you have a certain performance or whatever, you have to do something to keep your nerves down, but understanding that it doesn't need to be some substance, but how can I do it instead? But I think that sensitivity, like in Denmark, there's been a lot of research about how do you say, smoking, not cigarettes, what's called, joints. And, yeah, all kind of that when you have a high sensitivity and you do that, the addiction goes even faster because your system is like it's kind of absorbing it so fast. So the chance that you get addicted is much higher when you have a high sensitivity. So I do think that sensitive people need to be extra careful about why they're doing it and what could be an alternative. I'm not sure if I'm asking or answering your questions, but I do believe that it's an easy coping mechanism and we have to be very careful.
Yeah, I would completely agree. You know, there's two pieces to that. There is the high sensitivity and the need for something, anything to relieve the discomfort, which is what you're talking about, relieving discomfort with an external substance. And as HSPs, we would be more often in a situation where we would feel that potentially. But there's also the fundamental high sensitivity to chemicals, to you know, think like I can't take pills. I'm just so sensitive to substance. And when Elisha was talking earlier about it hits her system, I'm exactly the same with nicotine, with alcohol, with sugar. Once it hits my system, it's almost immediate. I light up like a Christmas tree, like my pleasure center in my brain's like boom. And therefore, the value that I place on these substances is very, very high because the reward is very, very high. So I think you're 100% right. I think we need as HSPs to be a lot more cautious. What do you guys think, Elisha and Alex?
Yeah, I very much agree with all of that. And for me, with my, you know, it was definitely a sort of like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, oh, I'm depressed. Or if I'm lacking in situations where I'm lacking confidence and I don't know people, and you know, I wasn't in alignment with myself. I wasn't in ownership with who I was, and I was always that. Do you know, I just need that one drink, you know, just to get that sort of Dutch courage, as they say, you know, and I just need to just have that one drink. Then, like Alex said, you know, there's an opening up, and it's like, yeah, I can just open my heart center because in my head, I didn't know how to live from my. Really, when I think about it all said and done, I didn't know how to be me in certain situations because I would either be too much or I would deem quiet and rude. So it's like I just couldn't win with a lot of situations being high sensory. And yeah, you know, the sensitivity with substance has always been my thing throughout my life, whether it's caffeine, sugar, alcohol, you know, I just can't do it. And it was definitely, for most of the time, it was always this value placed on it, whether you know, and whether it was a coping mechanism. And these days, I very much kind of, it's funny, it's like these days I almost don't want to drink. It's like I don't actually want to drink anymore, because I'm so in alignment with myself that I don't want anything to get in the way of that. I don't want any chemicals to mess that up, because it's kind of like it's like a free running system, and I like it. And the electricity, let's call it, it's running really, really nicely. And if I get any substances involved, it's going to completely sort of fragment where these bits of electricity are trying to get to, and this energy is trying to get to. So you know, it's something that, yeah, I sort of stay clear of. But like I said, there is this value of, oh, if I'm seen to be drinking, and you know, you're out with people and it's nice to have the glass, and just like I get to be that person. But it's like, no, more and more now it's like, no, I'm gonna be me, and people can just shove it.
Yeah, I like that. I always got to the stage where people say, "Why aren't you drinking?" And I will say, "Why are you?" It's
Exactly.
that, you know, it's we're shifting. The things are changing. It's like, actually, drinking really made me feel like shit, and so why would I do it?
Oh, one thing I wanted to add actually into it was, for high sensory people, it's what was the game changer for me, like I said, was changing my circumstances. I mean, I had a lot of circumstances to change, and knowing I was HSP helped, but changing, getting out of the relationship that didn't work for me, getting out of, you know, running 2 businesses that didn't work for me, you know, creating a life that's more in alignment with who and what I am, really gets rid of that need for the alcohol once you're doing things that really matter to you. And it's also managing the environment. If you're able to change things in your environment to help with your sensitivities, to help with that anxiety or the overwhelm, that really then, for me, sort of, yeah, gets rid of the need for alcohol and that numbing and that sort of calming down.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Elisha. Any thoughts, Alex, on this?
Yeah, I think there's, you mentioned the chemistry. There's an actual chemistry behind all that. And the basis of that is the rewarding system. And it's very differently regulated within each of us. And the rewarding system is something that, when you are in a depressive state, has gone dead. So we need to find other ways to feed our rewarding system. Many people do that with, say, digital distractions. But if you go too much into fictitious digital worlds, you end up falling out of the real world and become unable to navigate it. So I like the take of the Anglo-Swiss journalist Johann Hari, who has lost a brother to addiction, who had to live with depression forever. And he sees the loss or the lack of human connection as the root of all this evil, or all these ailments, say. So he says, rebuild your human connections, and you don't need all that. You know, they will fill your rewarding system instead of all these substances.
Yeah, he did a wonderful TED talk, didn't he? I think on that, called
Connection
is the opposite of it.
Yeah, at least one. There are many podcasts with him. He's very interesting to listen to. What I also wanted to add, in his book on depressions, that's called Lost Connection, he mentions when he was, I think, on the top of the Kilimanjaro, and he said it's impossible to be depressive on a summit of a mountain, because then you feel that you are connected to everything else. And this is, I think, very, very important to HSP, to be to feel connected to some greater good, something that's really beyond them. It's very difficult for them to fall into addiction, I guess, when they feel connected to something that's just bigger than them.
Yeah, I love that you've brought that up, and I think that will kind of lead us into the next point that I was hoping to discuss, which is, you know, we have this very sensory attuned internal environment as HSPs. You know, we have this amygdala that's slightly potentially larger and more prone to these fears and anxieties. We have the insula, which is what we call the seat of consciousness, which is, I guess, what you're talking about to a degree, Alex, is as HSPs, our opportunities, I think, and I see this in the people that I work with, we can go one way with this and we can fall very deeply into addiction because it feeds and meets the needs that we have to escape, to numb, to find refuge. However, conversely, on the other side of things, when we can learn how to self-regulate, when we can learn how to connect to that seat of consciousness, that true self, that inner knowing that Elisha talked about, when people get to that stage in their addiction where they say, and I think Elisha said it, I just knew, something inside me knew this was not for me, this wasn't working for me. And I think HSPs are actually more likely to get to that point with any sort of addiction because of that connection to inner consciousness, a deeper sense of that there is something more. And, even AA is founded on, looking to a higher power. So how can we as HSPs, what practical things can we do, maybe even on a day-to-day basis, that replace the external substance that can feed us from the inside out as opposed to us being fed from the outside in? What sorts of things can we do?
Well, I like to tell my clients, find yourself a mission in service of others. These others don't need to be human beings, but find yourself a mission in service of others.
Can you say more to that, Alex? Like what, because I totally agree. I'm just interested to learn more. How have you got any examples of what people have done and how that's worked for them?
People, for example, just starting their own business or becoming independent workers, or people also starting to, a small group of people who will talk about being an HSP, or acknowledging how they actually are already in service of others, but didn't really see it that way.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful thing to do. Yeah,
there seems to be a North Star for HSP to actually be in service of others, and perhaps they don't really see it, that they actually are underway into that direction.
Yeah, that's so true. And so many HSPs will say, but what is my purpose? I'm looking for a purpose. And you can pull that right back and highlight the fact that their purpose is their day-to-day interactions with every human being that they come across, that they have the opportunity to impact from a service point of view.
I also like to ask them, it's a bit provocative sometimes, but I like to ask them, what would be the reasons why actually you are already at exactly the place you are meant for? Because many of them, they want to change, they want to leave, they want to go away. So what if that's just not the right thing to do?
Oh, I love that. Isn't that wonderful to say, what would it be like if things were right just as they are, if actually you're right where you're meant to be? And I think so many of us, again, it's that looking for something. We want to fix our internal with the external. I'll change my job. I'll change my relationship. I'll have a drink. I'll smoke a cigarette. And just, coming back to actually the answers are all inside. Elisha, Rikke.
Yeah, I'm gonna dive in. I've got sort of a couple of things, but they sort of hopefully go together. So I was it last year? I think it was last year. That's when I got into, I tried cold showers quite a few years ago, about 4 years ago, and that was really good for me. That really did help, not just from a high sensory temperature regulating my system, but it really did help with my mental state. my anxiety, my depressions and stuff. But I did have to ease off when I had a lot of change, because the nervous system couldn't handle it all. It couldn't handle all the change and the upheaval, and then the cold shower. Like it was too much, as they say. But so last year I got into wild swimming, and I probably shouldn't use this word, but I'm addicted to my own chemical hits, if that makes any sense. So like I've had some wild swimming hits where I just like the chemical, it doesn't happen every time. Maybe it might be what I've eaten, what my own chemicals are doing, being a woman, what time of the month it is, and things like that, and if I've had enough sleep. But I'll just get out the water and I'll just literally have these really intense chemical hits that some people get. I haven't really met too many people that get them quite as intense as me yet, but I just love it. It was almost an addiction that after 2-3 days I was like, oh my gosh, I need my hit. Being high sensation seeking, like that little aspect of me needs to be satisfied. And again, it's really healthy, but my gosh, like the benefits were just sort of tenfold, and they'd last for days. And things like expressing myself, that really helps my own chemicals in my own body. It makes me feel really good. So it's not external, it's what's coming from within me. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna speak up for myself, or I'm gonna share this, or I'm gonna push my own boundaries. And it can be really subtle, it can be really, really gentle. It doesn't have to be grand gestures, it doesn't have to be massive, huge, life-altering changes and pushing boundaries. It can be just little baby steps that just make you feel good, like, oh, I've said my truth, or I've said I'm being really honest with myself with this person, and it just makes you feel really good inside. So to me, it's all of those many things. It's what it took ages, but it was experimenting with what makes me feel really good. Oh, this does this to me, and oh, this does that to me. And it's like, actually, I don't, like I said earlier, I now don't want any substances in my system. I want to be as clean as possible, because I love my own chemical reactions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's super juicy, that. And I think, that's the state. I think the thing that we'd emphasize is that you'd say it takes time. And if anybody is listening to this and is thinking, well, I don't even know what she's talking about, or that sounds like I couldn't get to that point. It really is a patience, a work of diligence and intention and patience. And also what I love is that Elisha, it's a real problem.
Elisha,
Elisha 1,000 times, is an example of a living example of somebody that has gone through the dark times and has found her way out. And you can tell by the way that she's speaking that it's not something that happened overnight. So I think it's important to really highlight the fact that, particularly if you are struggling with substance, that patience and compassion are paramount, and also belief that it will improve. Rikke, I didn't get to you on that one. What have you got up your sleeve?
I love the other answer, so I'll add to that, because a big thing for me, but also for clients that I work with, and this has grown as well, because I've had the knowledge for many years, maybe all my life, but the last 10 years, it's just more and more allowing yourself to feel your body. So allowing yourself to understand your body. So when we have a high sensitivity, we do have up and downs. So for many high sensories, Monday morning can be tough. Or after being with a lot of people, you will have time where you need to calm your body. You need to have downtime with yourself. So being in that energy balance and understanding how that feels in your body. No two people are alike. But for me, swimming in the ocean, I live in the cold north, so that's quite effective. You really get a rush. But that is also something that I can actually do that, even though it's maybe 2-3 degrees cold, that I can actually, push that boundary and feel what it does to my body. I become alive, and that it's not dangerous. So allowing myself to feel this is different, or this is doing this or that. So, and also nature in general, to feel what happens when I get quiet. What happens when I listen to the sounds, hear the birds? Because I didn't used to pay attention to that when I went to the forest. It was all about, it's very light, or it's autumn. I love the autumn colors or something like that. But I really didn't pay attention to the small things or the sounds. So actually so it's about the resonance, like sound healing. You can actually do that by listening to the waves or the wind or the birds or something like that. And kind of, when you move your body, also you can do that intuitively, dancing, or just, for many people you say, yeah, meditate, sit very still and quiet. What if you're just moving the way your body wants to move in a kind of meditation? So understanding how my body contracts, how it eases up, how I expand within. And I use some of my spirituality to do that. That is mine. Some use prayers, some use other things. Understanding your inner child. So when there's a voice saying, oh, you have to, of course you can be with 100 people again today, teaching or whatever. What if your inner child is like, I don't want to do that? Ask the child, what do we need right now? I know it sounds silly, and I'm not schizophrenic, but it's really to talk to that part of you who are not ready to go. Ask what is needed. I just need 5 minutes on my own, calming my nerves, and then I can be up and running again. So if we don't pay attention to our body system, if you like, then I think we can do all kinds of things, but that will still be coping. But understanding your full system and not like only the head, and allow yourself to be with the feeling that it's a wave coming through you, then it's just amazing to feel and see how quick you can actually change. So I have one example. When I have downtime, people like to say, oh, let me give you a hug. I really feel that you are down right now. And I'm like, please, I don't need that hug. I need my own space. So that took me many years to understand. That's what I need. I need time on my own, and then maybe I need the hugs. But if I get the hugs, then I feel, oh, now I have to like your hug. So I need to stay with that. But I actually feel that I'm contracted already. So somebody holding tight, I can't breathe. So I need to do something to expand. I don't know if it makes sense.
Oh, there's so much good stuff in there. I was writing some notes down because I'm hoping to sort of summarize some tips for everyone before we finish. But I think the overriding message that I'm getting from all of you, I feel, is that if we are drinking, if we are clouding our bodies with a substance, and let's just say alcohol, we cannot connect to what it is that we really need. We cannot, as Rikke's talking about, feel the body because we are taken out of our connection to bodily sensations, and they are changed. I do agree with what Alex was saying about the one glass of wine that can open you up. That's I think another conversation that I'm going to get into perhaps tonight. Perhaps it's a road for very few people. Let's put it that way. I don't know there are many people that can just gently stop at one drink. But what I did want to highlight is, yes, self-knowledge is impossible, I believe, if you are drinking or taking drugs or filling your body with artificial substance. And then if you can't know who you are, then you cannot soothe, you cannot connect, you cannot regulate. So I just wanted to list the things that you guys have come up with for anyone that's listening, that may be looking for tools, practical tools that you can use instead of picking up the wine. And I think first and foremost is an awareness that if you are highly sensitive or high sensory, then be really kind to yourself if you are using alcohol as a coping mechanism. It's totally understandable, and you're definitely not alone. There are many ways in which you can either cut back or quit, but practical tools, definitely what Alex suggested, which is service for others. Because drinking is quite a selfish and self-absorbed act, let's be honest. So if you take your focus off yourself and focus on others, that helps not just with drinking, it helps with life in general. You just feel so much better when you're not thinking about yourself, because we've probably spent far too much time doing that. I know I did and still do at times. The other things that were mentioned is cold showers. So if cold showers too much, just putting your pulse points under cold water, splashing it on your face. It's really helpful for cravings. Just shifting your physiology slightly with a blast of cold water. I have no idea what wild swimming is, but it sounds wild. I love the idea of it. I'm assuming you just throw yourself with abandon into bodies of water and hope for the best. Is that about right?
Pretty much. It could be rivers, it could be the sea, it could be marine lakes, it could be just wild pools or lakes. Yeah, it's anything that's natural, basically.
Wow, I love that. Self-expression, Rikke was talking about, and Elisha, gently, and I love that you said that, just, drip, baby steps, because it's very uncomfortable if you're not used to doing it. So just baby steps, and feeling how that feels. I just spoke something that I wouldn't normally say. That's pretty cool. Feeling your body, really connecting with the sensations in the body, the waves of craving. We talk about urge surfing, like cravings are like waves, and you can kind of surf them like a surfer surfs a wave. There's lots of meditations on that online. Just look them up. Urge surfing meditations. Being out in nature and really being in nature, being quiet, being with yourself. Very scary stuff. But we need to be able to learn to do that more and more, just gently, even if it's 1 minute a day that you stop and breathe, and see how that feels. Try it on. Maybe you like it. Maybe next day you'll do 2 minutes. A couple of ones for me. Being in the present moment is so important. When we are in craving, we are not in the present moment. So taking your hand, I am here now. I am here now is a really great tool. Pressing the fingers together as you say the words to really ground yourself in the present moment. Pulls you back from cravings and negative thinking. And another question that I love to give my clients when they're getting into negative thinking, how can I be kind to myself in this moment? It's a very powerful question when we are in that negative cycle, to stop and say, how can I be kind to myself in this moment? Yeah. Anything else that I've missed, guys, or anything else you want to add? I think we've gone a bit over time.
I just would like to add, if HSP are probably in a particular trap because human connections are so much more important to them than to others, perhaps. But they also have a proclivity towards avoidance behaviors and may end up in loneliness. If addiction and or alcohol and or distraction are a way to compensate for lack of human connections, if you think that your human connections outside there are just too shallow or too small or too not satisfying. Actually, I think there's this esoteric principle on the outside as in the inside, which I think has a real strong psychological reality. So perhaps if your connections on the outside are not as strong as you need, perhaps you need to repair the connections on the inside. Perhaps there's some reconciliation to be done, some reconnection to be done on the inside first. So the recommendation for that is to seek help and to start from there.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think that's absolutely wonderful way to finish up. There's no shame in getting support. And it's the doorway to so much wonderful growth and opportunity. You don't have to do it on your own. I'm pretty sure that every single one of us on this call has sought help at some point in their lives. Certainly lots of it. Yeah, here we go. We've all done it. We've all invested.
Charged.
Yes. So I thank you so much for that, Alex. I think that's absolutely wonderful way to finish up. Thanks, guys. I think that was for me really a really wonderful conversation. I really appreciate all your honesty and openness, and look forward to the next one. I'm excited to know what that's going to be about. Thanks for listening, everybody, and see you next time.